Welcome back to Flashpoint. Right now, the Queen City is undergoing one of the biggest apartment expansions in the entire country. From South End to University City, Charlotte is adding nearly 30,000 apartment units over the next few years. And with all that supply, rent prices are finally trending downward. Joining us now is Chuck McShane. He's the Director of Market Analytics at CoStar, based here in Charlotte. Chuck, welcome back to Flashpoint. Nice to have you again.
Thanks for having me.
So a new report from CoStar shows that Charlotte is actually leading the greatest apartment expansion in the country, beating out places like Miami, Austin as well. So it begs the question, why here in Charlotte and why now?
Well, I think number one, we've seen tremendous population growth in Charlotte. We've seen this throughout the Sun Belt, but Charlotte is consistently one of the top 10 metros for population growth. And it's not only population growth, it's also the type of population growth, the household growth that we've seen here. We've been a magnet for post-college talent, which typically involves a lot of single households, a lot of young households, renter households, which is driving demand for apartments. And as you've probably seen in neighborhoods like South End, Lower South End, NoDa, these areas. So that's driven a lot of the demand for new apartments to be developed in the area. We're also seeing growth in suburban markets as well. So it's primarily an urban phenomenon, but we're also seeing growth in the suburbs as well.
All right, let me ask you the other equation of that. What does that mean for rent prices?
Well, we're starting to see it have an impact on rents now. So demand for apartments is still strong. We saw leasing in 2023 that was basically on par with historical trends. But what's unusual right now is we have a construction pipeline, as you mentioned, unlike anything we've ever seen in the market. 14,000 new units opened last year, and we have another 30,000 currently underway. And so while we're still seeing strong demand, it's not quite enough to match that supply. So simply said, the bottom line is, in the short term at least, we have more apartments than we have renters currently, and that's leading to discounts on rent. So asking rents are down about 2% over the past year, and a little over 3% since their peak in mid-2022. And not only that, that's a $50 drop basically to around $1,500 a month. But we're also seeing properties offer increasing concessions as they compete for those renters. These aren't reflected in the asking rents, but they can often have a deeper impact on the total cost over the life of an apartment lease. So we're seeing about 1/3 of properties in the Charlotte area offer some form of concession, and that's typically 1 month of free rent, seen as much as six weeks of free rent currently. And when you think about that, 1 month of free rent, that's another 8% discount on a 1-year lease.
You know, it's a question that we've been asking for over a decade now. I think I probably did my first story on, are there too many apartments in Charlotte? Probably 12 years ago was probably the first story I did like that. And the answer was always a resounding, no, there's not too much apartments. And here we are, 2024, survived a pandemic, and we are still building apartments faster than any other place in the country. But I still have to ask the question I was asking a dozen years ago, is are we going to run into too much supply, a glut of apartments?
This is a short-term issue. So there's always a lag in terms of supply and demand. So 2 years ago, we were talking about a historically tight market and a historically high rent growth. So we saw in 2021 and into early 2022, rents increase as much as 15 to 20% annually. So this is the backside of that. That demand in 2022 caused a rush of new construction, and it takes 2 years to 30 months to complete many of these projects. So right now we're seeing apartments that broke ground in 2022 during this heightened demand when there wasn't enough supply for the demand that was out there. And now we're in a short-term period where there's a little bit too much supply that will quickly get absorbed over the next couple of years. We think that this is a temporary oversupply. There is strong demand for living in Charlotte. There's going to be continued population growth. We see continued growth of those single households, those young households that drive that demand. And in the long term, we expect these apartments to get filled. The other equation here is that while we do have a record number of apartments under construction currently, we're not seeing as many come out of the ground today. So construction starts were down by nearly half in 2023 compared to 2022. And that's going to mean fewer new apartments by early 2026. So we expect the market to come back into more equilibrium by then, and rent growth will return to more normal levels of around 3 to 4% at that time.
We often talk about how Charlotte is short homes and also lacking in affordable housing. Is this apartment expansion, how does this address that situation, understanding that there are two different equations here?
Well, I think the majority of people live in market rate housing. There's always going to be a need for some subsidy, particularly for lower income households. But the majority of the workforce, the majority of the population is always going to need market rate housing. So the more of the easier we make it to build, the more building that can occur in the Charlotte area, the more affordability can be maintained for the bulk of the population, or attainability of housing can be attained for the bulk of the population. If you look at the markets where rents are continuing to grow, it's actually markets where it's harder to build. So markets in the Northeast and Midwest, where you haven't seen as much construction currently over the last year, rents are continuing to grow there, even though demand is at lower levels. So longer term, this building, continuing to build and continuing to create housing opportunities at all levels is going to keep housing attainable, and all types of housing attainable in the longer term.
But what, if any, impact does this have on actual home prices for somebody wanting to move out of apartments and actually buy a house? How is this impacting that?
I think that the interest rate market is a big part of that. I'm not sure that the apartment market and the single family housing market are certainly separate.
Sure.
Separate phenomenon. I would say that the rise in interest rates, the rising cost of a mortgage currently is making renting a more affordable option for reducing the cost of renting compared to purchasing. The lack of new listings in the single family home market is also a challenge. And I think in general, population growth, household growth is going to lift both the single family home market and the rental market. Demand for both property types. I think that the challenges with purchasing homes right now on the margins will keep more people in rentals for longer than maybe we expected. But overall, more housing is good.
Wow. Charlotte leading the nation in apartment expansion. That is an impressive stat out there. All right, Chuck McShane, Director of Market Analytics at CoStar. Chuck, thanks for coming on again. We appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Well, even as the number of homes expands here in Charlotte, some in our community are still struggling. Next on Flashpoint, the effort to help our neighbors in need with the help of public and private funding.